Hello and welcome to HealthCast 305 podcast. My name is Dr. Rob Polizuk, owner of Physiologic Sports Physical Therapy and Performance. Today on the episode, we have a very special guest, and his name is Coach Alex Gonzalez, or Coach AGON as his Instagram name. And I was talking to him before the show a little bit, and he was giving me the meaning of why he picked AGON for his Instagram name. This isn't the most important thing, but I think it was cool the way he was describing it. So here, finish off that explanation, or I guess start from the top.
Yeah, I mean, first thanks for having me on. Really look forward to having fun, just breaking things down. But Agon's been my nickname since as long as I remember from baseball. And Alex Gonzalez, pretty simple. I guess
Common baseball name.
Yeah, common baseball name. So Agon became my nickname, and it's been that way ever since. But when I was actually going to name my company, my fiance told me, "Do you know what your name means?" And I go, "I have no idea." So I ran a Google search, and I mean, she's brilliant. She's finishing her doctorate degree. She'll be a doctor, a different type of doctor, but a doctor anyways. And when I did the search, it's Greek for sports, it's Greek for debate, it's Greek for competition. It's actually what the Greeks called the Olympic sports back in the day. So it was pretty cool. So that's what I went with. It made a lot of sense for me, and I just went with it, and it worked with my name. So kind of a double-edged positive, I guess.
What kind of doctor is she going to become?
Her doctor will be in education. So it's not a medical doctor, but she's a doctor nonetheless.
Yeah, no wonder she thought of this thing for you. She's like, let's go home, and I want you to find out what your name means. And you're like, okay, for sure.
She's definitely the sharp tool in the shed.
Okay. Oh, God, I can only imagine, right?
Yeah.
She should help you write some of those programs. So, so I met you. I actually met you a couple years ago when I was doing my marketing binges over in Doral. I ran into you when you were working out of a certain location in Doral, and you were teaching a bunch of kids. They were all throwing baseballs really hard, and there was all this cool stuff going on. And I was like, oh, I want to get to know more about this guy because it looks like he has some people that overlap with me, with rehab and stuff. And that's when I first heard of you. Now, I was in the gym. I go to Elevation Fitness. That's the gym I work out. It's the gym I work out of and I work out in. And there's this fella that's always there. And I figured he played baseball because he always wears his Astros gear to the gym. And and it was funny because I knew this guy was legit when he brought a freaking a tensioner. One of those things they test to see how strong industrial wires are, where it has two hooks and he's pulling on it to see how strong his bands are when he's doing the power squats. Or in the squats within the power rack, right? So he was band tension testing with this analog scale, the weight of the band, and then he had a phone and he was FaceTiming you, and he was looking at this guy's legit. Well, he must be a professional athlete because he's. So then I talked to him, and it's Alex De Goti, and I learned a little bit about him, and we got to talking, and you came up, and I was like, oh, I know that guy, and he said, yeah, you should talk to him. He's a smart guy, and he'd probably love to do a podcast. So, so you've worked with a lot of baseball players in your day, right? I mean, when did you start doing all this?
So I've been working with players while I was a player. So when I was in high school and in college, most of my teammates would just gravitate towards me for whatever reason to ask questions that either the coaches didn't care to answer or weren't prepared to answer. And I would be basically a pseudo coach.
Yeah.
So over 20 years. So I'm 37 now. I stumbled across my first book on programming and training and stuff when I was 15 years old. So this is 22 years where I could say I've coached somebody other than myself. And so, yeah, it's a long time.
Yeah, so you've been after it for a while. And pretty young, you had started working with these athletes, right? I mean, when you actually started
So as a business,
as a business.
When I graduated from, I went to Barry University in North Miami, got a bachelor's of science in human performance, and then went and played some professional baseball with the Boston Red Sox organization, and at the same time decided I was going to open up a training facility Started out of the back of a supplement store, then outgrew that pretty quickly, and moved into a warehouse right behind the supplement store, and started a company called Evolution Sports Performance. And I did that for about 7 years, and then ended up, gravitating back towards baseball. Became an assistant coach at my alma mater at Barry, and then ended up being the associate head coach, and did that for about 8 years. And decided I started seeing a lot of things on Instagram, unfortunately poorly done. And I was like, man, if I'm ever going to do this again, it's basically now or never. And I decided to jump ship and go down this rabbit hole again. So long time
Yeah, it sounds like you really have been after it. So you really pride yourself on producing good content too, because I've been on your Instagram account, and you like to get to the nuts and bolts of things, right? So one of the things I saw you, yeah, I mean, that's great, because when you can hear someone that's intelligent, that knows what they're talking about, actually go through the process, and that's the way you talk, and it's refreshing, instead of someone just being like, yo, this is how it's done, like take it or leave it. Like, I think that you do a good job of speaking to people about the exact issue you're speaking of. So for example, the one I saw the other day was when you were talking about energy systems. So you were like doing like an Instagram question answer, and how specificity of training is not always specificity of training is not always correctly utilized. Like, people will do endurance training for baseball players way too much. And that's an old school thing, for football, for baseball. Like, I remember they'd have us running long distances. Like, they'd have us like chart our jogging distance for football during the off season. I was like, maybe that was to keep us from getting fat. But man, I don't think that was good that wasn't really like specific to what we needed,
No, it all boils down to principles. Methods are many, principles are few. And unfortunately, there's many well-intentioned people who gravitate towards the sport that they played, and then they get the title coach, and they forget that a coach is basically a teacher of sport. And in order to teach, you actually have to have not just experience, but the knowledge and the awareness to actually educate others. And it just becomes, well, this is what we always did, so this is what I'm going to continue doing. And unfortunately, those that suffer are the people under that tutelage. And, I would present that, if anybody believes the world is flat today, which there are some people, it's probably a problem between the ears for those people, because, we've come to realize that the world isn't flat. And the same thing goes to principles and methods. So a lot of people think that I'm against long distance running, or I'm against running, period. And it's just that, as you said, the specificity of training, the specific adaptation to impose demands, the said principle determines everything that you should be doing or not doing. And long distance running is training the wrong energy system. You talked about energy systems. So I was basically walking around a mall with my camera, answering these questions and posting it up. And I stumbled across a pretty funny video where a lady in a Tesla, apparently it wasn't her car, was trying to fill up a Tesla with gasoline, and she couldn't understand like how to put fuel in the car. So I thought it was hilarious. I tried to post it. I got copyright infringement because it wasn't my content. But then I went down that rabbit hole to explain it. And that's the easiest way to explain it. You got gas, you got diesel, and you got electric. If I can't put diesel in a gas engine, it's not going to go very far, vice versa. And I sure as heck can't use it for an electric vehicle. So when we talk about the different energy systems, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole of crazy specifics, but, anaerobic athletes should not be trained aerobically. That doesn't, it's not that aerobic training is terrible. It's just if training is a pizza pie, the smallest slice in the pie will be aerobic training for a strength and power athlete. And baseball is a strength and power athlete. Softball, strength and power athlete. Those are the two main sports I train. And all the other, basically any team sport is strength and power dominant. no one's really doing anything in a team sport beyond 15 to 20 seconds.
Yeah.
So the idea of training any other way is just doesn't make any sense. It's never made any sense. It's just, again, they just do it the way they've always done it. And that to me isn't good. I don't believe that there's such thing as bad students. I think there's bad teachers. And unfortunately, there's a lot of great, well-intentioned people that need to educate themselves if they're going to go down that rabbit hole. And unfortunately, it's just the case.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, even if you didn't know anything about energy systems and how they were used, if you just looked at the way the sports were played, you wouldn't necessarily like how could long distance running or certain activities translate. Like we already train athletes specifically, like if they're playing soccer, you have them playing with a soccer ball with their feet. You're not going to have them like throwing the ball because that doesn't really relate to the specifics of their sport. So I totally get it. And, I have a CSCS, but I haven't really put into play like actually working with teams full of athletes and train them. So I know that can get pretty intense. So
100%,
yeah. So that takes a whole different brain, and to be able to put all that together and utilize that with a group of athletes and make sure that they're actually training specifically towards our sport. I could see how some people might fall into this age-old tradition of like, well, we're gonna jog, and then punishment will be more jogging, and everything conditioning will be jogging. It's just like, maybe you can make your punishment and conditioning like related to the intervals of the sport. So maybe
and
training.
I think that specificity, again, in sports, specificity is really about the energy system that you're training, because outside of, you mentioned CSCS, I had that as well at some point. I don't think I'm pretty sure my certification has elapsed. Not that anybody's ever asked me for my certifications or my degree for that reason, for that matter, but it's irrelevant. Yeah, it's super funny. But the specificity action, the specificity principle is something that, it's not about taking movements that happen in sport and adding resistance to them. That's another kind of big thing that I really have a tough time swallowing when I see that, because it isn't that. What you do in the weight room is going to be very hard to be specific on the field. There's some transitional things specifically for our sport, baseball, softball, or a medicine ball or a weighted ball. Applying a slight overload is going to help. But most of the time when you overload too much, it changes the mechanics of the movement. So it's very hard for it to be specific. I like to call those special exercises, or special strengths. Louis Simmons and Westside will call them special strengths, movements that build the main movement, or that bring up a weak movement, but not necessarily specific. And I think that we use that term very, broad to mean too many things, which is funny because it's specific, so it shouldn't mean too many things. But I just see a lot of things out there in the performance side of things that it's just easy to someone that doesn't really know, a client or a parent, and say, yeah, we're gonna do some agilities while we're bouncing a basketball. Like that's not the type of agility that the basketball player, like, you're only going to develop that by playing basketball. You can get better at a ladder, but eventually you'll just be getting better at a ladder. It's not going to actually transfer to the sport unless you apply that stimulus specific to the sport. So I just wanted to touch upon that because we're talking about specificity, and energy systems is really where it should be specific. Everything beyond that, unless it's technical and tactical training of the sport, is not really specific. And the exception is special exercises. And few sports actually have special exercises to apply. Weighted rackets in tennis was a failed experiment. Weighted tennis balls, not a good experiment. So in baseball, weighted baseballs and softballs actually do have a great carryover. But you better have built a great broad base of support with traditional general strength and power training. If not, it's pretty much not going to carry over, and the athlete's most likely just going to get hurt attempting to move a weight that they can't move quickly.
Yeah, what about this weighted baseball bat? Right before the players hit, they always put the weight in the baseball bat just to make it.
Yeah. So, I mean, in training, we use overload bats and underload bats. Again, said principle. We're attempting to create a specific adaptation over a period of time, usually leading up to the season, preseason, and off season. The closer you are to the season, the more that starts to taper. Simply because you really want to have refinement over that technical skill. Yeah, donuts and weighted bats have been used for a very long time. It's something that is traditional in baseball. Some programs, some teams are starting to move away from that. The research has not concluded decisively, because, I mean, no one's really doing a massive amount of research on this, but it doesn't really improve bat speed in the moment. You know, you think about like, potentiation, where you do like a super maximal lift and then you do some jumps. So there's some carryover to that. But that's still gross movement. You know, when you're talking about something that needs to be so refined and so well timed and coordinated to hit something that's coming at you at 100 miles an hour, it's basically a bullet. It's a ballistic movement. Every millisecond counts. So if it alters your swing path just a little bit, you don't have enough time from the on-deck circle to the batter's box for your brain to remap it. In training, yeah, you have time. You have weeks. You know what I'm saying? But to do it right before you go into the batter's box, again, it's something that's been done forever and ever. If somebody likes to do it and is accommodated to doing it, which is basically why it doesn't destroy everyone's swing, it's because everyone's just accommodated to it. They've always done it. So
Yeah,
if you've always
like
done it, your brain,
yeah,
your brain has figured out enough time over a long period of time to figure it out. But if I was going to tell someone to do it, I wouldn't. But if someone's used to it, you know, if you're used to it,
is it less common nowadays?
There's some organizations that are starting to move away from that in competition. Now, in training, like I said, it should be part of someone's protocol.
Because you're building up to something.
Yeah, you're building up to something, and you can use it in practice, you know, as a stimulus, as part of a program to kind of excite the nervous system and get your body to be primed to move quickly. Me personally, probably wouldn't program it for someone unless they were just used to it. You know, it doesn't really change anything in the moment. But yeah, it's definitely something that's used.
So speaking of programming,
Sure.
Obviously your methodology, we already have some sites into it right now, is different than many's, and it has its own successes too associated with it. So what about your coaching? Would you say what are some of the biggest differences amongst like the basic basic strength coaches and trainers out there for baseball for young athletes? What about your programming is different? What kind of things did you notice that you wanted to focus on specifically when you were creating your performance, AGON performance, or your?
Sure. Well, it's definitely evolved over time. I always come back to the principles. The principles are important. And what unfortunately happens specifically in amateur and youth sports and even some professional sports, I mean, I see some absolute horrific things on social media that get sent to me. I have to tell people stop sending it to me, because you just give me a stomachache and you get me really upset. Unfortunately, again, the specificity principle being applied outside of energy systems and some key special strengths gets overly applied. So back to that basketball training, agility, and it doesn't work. Focus on force production, focus on relative strength and reactive strength, and building the different types of engines necessary for an athlete to perform on the field in the weight room. Stop trying to bring the field to the weight room unless you actually know what you're doing, and most people do not. And players would be better because of it. So that's a problem. So in terms of methodology, I mean, we're going to go through an assessment with a player, and we're going to identify weaknesses and strengths, limitations, and then we're going to address it through programming over time. And that's the gist of it. And then we're going to retest, and then we're going to live in that cycle, until the training becomes the testing, so to speak. The players that are in that process, they know where they stand at all times. You mentioned Alex. I mean, he knows what he stands today. He knows every single record he needs to set and break. He knows what indicators he needs to get better at. He knows that over the next 8 weeks, we're going to ramp up his sprinting. He spends a lot of time on cleats. His feet are a disaster. Body just needs a little bit of unloading from being on his feet all the time. So we do a lot of sled pushing, sled dragging, walking, power walking, all for speed, before we actually start implementing sprinting into his programming. So that's just one example. But what's different, we're going to assess, we're going to address, we're going to retest, and we're going to keep living in that cycle over and over and over again. Players are going to build strength and power, real strength and power, not just false strength and power. And they're going to know exactly where they are at all times. And it's not for everybody. I have one of my players who's in college now. I don't handle his programming right now because he's at the university and they're doing a halfway decent job. And he's like, man, I hit my indicator for the first time. I feel fantastic. This is what we're doing. This is what, and I start asking him, what was different, and he's like, man, you just set a standard for us to understand what we need to actually accomplish to get better. It's not just, hey, we're going to go lift weights. It's no, you're going to lift weights with a purpose because you're going to execute these standards and then you're going to drive those standards up, and those standards are going to transfer to your sport. And this is how, and this is why. So when you do those two things, when players understand the why behind the how, they tend to buy in. And unfortunately, though, it's much easier to put some cool stuff on Instagram, and which is great, and drive a lot of traffic, which is great. The results are better. So I care about the results. I care about the feedback that players provide. I don't really care about ignorance. I'm here to help. But if you want to stay ignorant, God bless you. I guess it's bliss. I spent a long time studying to be able to share and be a resource, but unfortunately, a lot of people don't really want that. So what makes it great? What made it great, what will make it great again and better is culture. The players and the parents who buy into that process, the results are there because they know where they stand every day. Like the weights, what you lift, you know what you can't. Mm-hmm. The radar gun, every single throw is registered, logged, and recorded. There's no way to hide whether you're getting better or you're getting worse. I can't hide as a coach. I can't say, oh yeah, this guy's an animal. He's gotten so much better and so much stronger. Really? What's a squat? What's his deadlift? How many chin-ups can he produce? How far can he throw it? How fast can he throw it? How fast can he run? They don't know the answers.
They're winging it. If you don't know the answer, right?
If you don't know the answer, how can you get better?
Yeah.
And that's 99% of the trainers and the coaches in this town and across the country and across the world. Objectively quantify everything you do, validate what you do, then come talk to me. When you spend, thousands and thousands and thousands of hours working with players over 2 decades, then come talk to me about the results you delivered or didn't deliver. I am a byproduct, and what I do is a byproduct of more of the failures I had with players, not helping them, than I am about the successes.
Yeah.
So
that's how you learn, right? Because those failures, you're like, oh my God, I need to not let this happen again.
Yeah, and that brings you back to principles. So at the end of the day, methods are many and principles are few. So I don't want to apply what's not the best. If there's a better way, great. But until a better way shows up, I'm going with the best way to solve this problem. And the rest is for that player to put in the time and effort and push their body to the intensity necessary to get that adaptation. And that's why you mentioned, Alex, measuring band tension. Yeah, dude, if at the top, this is what the band tension should be, and we're working at a percentage of your max in band tension to force your body to improve the ability to accelerate through the strength curve, and you don't know how much tension that is, then how on earth can we properly program? So like something as simple as, do you know how much that band produces tension at the top? You don't? Then how do you know that you're building the right type of strength? If you don't have a mechanism to measure bar speed, and you don't know what speed the bar needs to move in order to develop a specific type of strength, then what are you doing?
Yeah.
And that's the difference between, a sport, an athlete, and a general population person. General population person, real simple. Listen, lift weights, between 80 and 90%, you're going to get strong. 3 to 5 rep sets, you're going to get strong.
Yeah, just like up and down.
6 to 10 reps, you're going to get slightly strong and bigger. 10 to 12 reps, okay, hypertrophy, do 4 sets. That's simple. You're not trying to get a specific adaptation that's going to power this person's life, so like I take that serious. I take that serious. That person's livelihood. I don't care if that kid's 8 years old or 18 or 25 and on the verge of being a big leaguer. It doesn't matter. The goal is to get that person better, and the same principles apply. The methods just might be slightly different based on their age and their qualifications and their time in training, et cetera. There's a lot of things to consider, but if you're not getting your players better and they don't know you're getting better, then you're just eyewash, and there's a lot of eyewash out there.
Eyewash?
Yeah, eyewash. It's just like, it's a lot of fluff.
Yeah, just like a lot of like training, swag with no principles.
Yeah. I mean, hey, we're doing a lot of agilities. Stuff. We're doing a lot of ladders. We're doing a lot of 360 jumps. Like, that's cool. That's fantastic. All those things, that doesn't not take effort. That takes effort. Mm-hmm. That takes work. I'm not saying these people are not working hard or that these players aren't sweating or they're not. But is what you're doing actually changing the adaptation that player needs to get better? I don't know.
So
I'm wrong.
How did you get to the point where you're using band tensioners and like these particular movements at certain speeds? So, like, I know that you're very well studied and like.
So the way I got here was very crazy. So, I played baseball at what ended up becoming one of the powerhouse baseball schools here in Miami. And I'm proud to say that I was a part of the beginning of that evolution for that school and that program. But when I was a sophomore, I just transferred in and I got hurt playing shortstop. And I basically didn't come back to practice for like 4 months. And because of that injury, I had to go to rehab. Didn't know what an injury was, didn't know what rehab was, didn't know what therapy was. Unfortunately, I was there with a handful of other professional players. A couple of them were pitchers, and they basically took me under their wing. And then I'm a seeker. I'm always asking questions, and a lot of coaches didn't like that. It almost like they felt I was insulting their intelligence or, not questioning their authority. And I just really wanted to know why we were doing what we were doing. So these guys kind of took me under their wing, and I started talking to my therapist. Hey, man, listen, where can I learn this? So here I am, a 14-year-old kid, and I'm asking his therapist. The therapist is like, get out of here, man. You can't learn any of this stuff. And then he had a book on his table, so I started reading it. And then fast forward, spring of my sophomore year, that same year, my pitching coach was actually substitute teaching a math class. I'll never forget it. And he had a book in his hand called The Pitching Edge by Dr. Tom House. And it was about pitching and pitching mechanics and motion capture. And it was like so ahead of its time. That guy's been ridiculed by so many people. And the guy that laughs the loudest, well, guess what? He's laughing pretty loud right now because everything he tested 40 years ago has been proven to be right. As it was proven 40 years ago. Now, the way that he went about it probably is different than what it would be done now, and I'm sure he would agree to that. But the principles of what it is haven't changed, and they will not change. So I started reading that book during that class, and I tried to steal the book or borrow it, and he's like, no, you can't. I'm like, where can you get this? I didn't even know they had books on training or baseball or anything. So he's like, bro, just go to the bookstore. So that day I took my grandfather, and God bless him, he spent probably like $500-600 just on books.
Gosh.
And I bought everything that was in the training section, everything that was in the baseball, softball section. I bought all of it. Didn't matter if it was coaching, teaching, it didn't matter. And over a period of years, I read every single one of them and started writing my own programming and, going to the gym. And, I put on 35 pounds, ended up going from 75-mile-an-hour fastball to a 90-mile-an-hour fastball, and quickly recognized that the stronger I got, the more powerful I got, the harder I threw, and started to question why we were long distance running. Why weren't we in the weight room? So I became a pest to my coaches, which was probably the wrong way to go about it, because they didn't see it the way I saw it. So they never asked me why I was asking these questions, and then basically started stumbling across the internet at that time, and started coming across some literature through powerlifting. I was like, those are the strongest guys in the world, so I might as well learn what the heck they do. And then I came across Louis Simmons at Westside Barbell, and Dave Tate, and Jim Wedler, and not Jim Wedler. Jim Wedler came after, but a bunch of guys in the powerlifting world. And I was like, all right, so these guys get strong and powerful. How can I adapt what they do to baseball? And then I started applying some of their principles with the tools that I had in a regular gym at the time. No bands, no chains, no special bars, but like changing the sets and reps so I didn't accommodate, and doing a bunch of stuff. And then I started stumbling across weighted balls and weighted baseballs, and a bunch of this couple guys, Set Pro, and I'm forgetting the guy's name. The guy was amazing. It'll come to me. But he basically had like this forum back in the day where this guy was an engineer, never played baseball, taught himself how to throw 85 miles an hour at like 45, 46 years old. I'm like, if this guy can learn, like, what are they doing?
Yeah.
So I just started stumbling across all this information that was right there. Just people weren't seeking it. And now it's blasted all over Instagram. It's taken for granted. And anybody can be a superstar coach now because they just copy a program and model it, and they really have no idea why it works or how it works. And it only works if you copy it, as long as things don't go bad.
Yeah.
As long as everything works perfect, I can just copy it. But the second that something goes wrong, those same people can't solve the problem because they don't really understand the foundational principles and the science behind it. So if people ask, what's the difference? It's just I actually I don't just know it. I haven't experienced it. I actually understand it to a level that I'm still getting better at. I'm not the world's authority on it. There's a lot of people doing a lot of research. God bless them. But I've spent a lot of time where I can see a lot of things that a lot of people can't see, and I can dissect it in the moment without having to get somebody under high-speed video or in a special motion capture system. Even though I have all those, I do those services with players that need it. I do it for them. I don't really do it for myself.
Yeah, because
so that they can see what's going on.
Yeah, because you can only have that Instagram or like cookie cutter mentality for so much. Like if something goes wrong, like the same thing with rehab. I could produce 100 videos right now of a bunch of crazy stuff, all the cool gimmicks. I don't want to call them gimmicks because we have a bunch of tools in the toolbox.
Exactly.
And you can use what you want, but a lot of therapists can just create or do whatever they want. Not even physical therapists or DPTs, just anyone could be like, well, this is a good rehab exercise. And there's plenty of people who aren't even physical therapists who have great rehab oriented minds, and actually in terms of outpatient orthopedic sports rehab, like they might be better than some PTs. So it is about understanding it through and through and being able to dissect it, pull it apart, and put your little components in there when you need to. Because if you do just copy someone or have a general idea of what you want without actually knowing the fundamentals, the anatomy, or the rationale for each thing you're doing, then you won't be able to actually change or manipulate the protocol when something does go wrong. And that's what separates a good coach or a good therapist from a bad coach or bad therapist. So
100%. I couldn't have said it any better. I mean, that's what it boils down to. And I'm happy you said that regarding a lot of people without those titles that are really good at what they do or that could be great, and a lot of people with those titles that really have no idea what they're doing, even though they have the title. And that's where, you know, I didn't learn a single thing. This is a statement, and people are like, "What? Get out of here." He's like, "Yeah, I didn't learn a single thing um, as it applies to improving an athlete's performance through my traditional track in school. The traditional track in school validated what I already knew. It didn't give me any new knowledge. I mean, the people teaching the class never saw a barbell in their life. Cardiac rehab, great. I mean, I'm not going to do that. Most of the research is endurance focused at that time, talking about 15, 18 years ago. So there wasn't really, and there, to this day, there really isn't a lot that you can go off of. So for me, having a simple, logical question of, if these are the strongest people in the world, and I throw a baseball in less than 1 second with everything I got, isn't that a maximal effort? And how do I improve maximal effort? I need to train maximal effort. I need to learn the principles of doing this. Now, obviously, I'm not a power lifter, but the principles that they apply allowed them to pick methods that were specific for the adaptation that they were looking for. And I can apply the same principles and apply methods to what I'm trying to look for.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all it really boiled down to. Once I understood the simplicity of that, then the rest is about how you want to structure it and testing that structure. And I say I'm on version 7 of the programming system, and it might as well be version 5,000, because
Mm-hmm.
in the end, I come back to the principles. The methods are great. It's cool. But I'm not going to have this player, like you mentioned Alex. Alex is someone who's special to me. Like, that guy's my brother.
Mm-hmm.
That guy's family. His family is my family. I'll do anything for him. And it's because that person, doesn't follow what I tell him blindly. That person's seeking to become the best of himself. And there's a reason why he's accomplished to the level he's accomplished, even though most people in Miami didn't think he would play past college. And he's at the doorstep. But that person's been training with me for over 12 years. That's unheard of. The people that I work with for the last, they don't leave. So at the end of the day, that to me is important. If I'm objectively showing you improvement and you don't leave, then you're not seeking another greener pasture, because this pasture is plenty green. It's continuing to help you improve. And that's what it should be about. You mentioned tools to the toolbox. Many methods, because eventually the same method will not keep improving the athlete, even though the same principle is being applied, because the body will accommodate to whatever you give it. So you have to be able to continue to apply different methods to help that person keep getting better. But the principles stay relatively constant, and when to apply them. So that to me is a badge of honor. A lot of great relationships that I've been able to build. Parents, the ability to be a resource to them. But it's definitely not the shiny thing. Give me the 30,000 square foot facility. Let me make it all shiny. Like, let me make it all look good. That doesn't mean it's going to perform, or the players are going to perform any better. Give me a very small, intimate facility that's going to push the boundaries of human performance and objectively measure it, and put those players on blast when they don't come in and perform, and because psychologically they will be driven to become better. And I do believe that psychology trumps physiology every single day of the week and 100 times on Sunday. And that's the other part of training that when you don't really know where you stand, then you can lie to yourself about how good you are. But when you know you're not that good and you're not hitting these standards, then you have to look at yourself in the mirror and say, do I want to get better or not? That's it, And unfortunately, that's just not the way that most in my niche, and hopefully football, it's different because football's got it's a built-in mechanism of accountability. I always say that football coaches are the best coaches in the world. They have to handle the largest roster. They have to get people better. Everything's objective. And everyone actually has to work as a team. If the offensive line doesn't stop anybody, the quarterback's going to die. In baseball, you can get away with it. There's only a handful of plays. They rarely come up in a game. You're at the mercy of your talent. And it's very individualistic most of the time. And, there's not a lot of, objective, quantifiable data to speak of that you can't put on someone else, if that makes sense. Like, okay, my ERA could be a point lower if my team just played better defense. Oh, okay. So how come you're walking more people and you strike out?
Yeah.
But there's always a way to justify why that is.
Pass the buck.
Yeah, pass the buck. So I love the weight room because it's the place where it doesn't matter. Like if you put 400 pounds on the bar and you don't move it, it's no one else's fault, bro. You can't move 400 pounds. Don't lie to yourself. No one's going to get under a bar with 500 pounds on his back and say, yeah, I can deep squat this, unless they actually can, or they're completely ridiculously out of their mind. There's only, what I'm saying? There's only two people like that. So yeah, the basically not having a complete program and one that's actually complete and that can actually deliver a result.
Yeah, so your off-season program is a complete mixture. Like there is like a absolute strength component. So do you have your athletes actually squatting extremely heavy, like sets of 5, 3, 1?
Yeah. So
like does Alex squat like a ton of weight? Like it's not like it's all just like power and getting around it. Like he's actually doing like isotonic slow strength training.
So we don't. So this is all West Side. It's not even West Side. It's Soviet. Okay, it's all Soviet Russian. I mean, Louis will say the same thing. If you ask him, it's the same. It's just they applied it to powerlifting. The other people applied it to Olympic lifting. I modify it for baseball and softball. So
it works.
You want to improve different qualities of strength. So in a general sense, if you can squat 400 pounds, then you can move 50% of 200 pounds a lot more times. If you can squat 600 pounds, you now can move 300 pounds equal to what you can move 200 pounds. So if you're not pushing absolute strength to a certain level, you're not going to be able to improve explosive strength and speed strength.
That makes total sense. Those power gains won't be there if you don't have the absolute strength gains.
So, and then if you don't have the conditioning, basically the ability to handle bodybuilding, so bodybuilding type training, which is a lot of volume, if you don't have enough volume, enough work capacity to handle working it up to a max, which is a lot, then you'll fail before you ever show max. So if you fail before you ever show max, the weakness is very simple. You don't have the capacity to handle work. So you need to spend more time in bodybuilding or sled dragging, which is a way to build work capacity without really destroying muscle tissue. And it helps restore muscle tissue, actually. So you have to move in a different direction. So to answer your point, yes, we're going to train maximally. Now, at some point, you don't get any more improvement from training maximal as it relates to the sport of baseball. This is where it deviates from the powerlifting mechanism. Powerlifters, there is no limit in their mind. Their sport is lifting in and of itself, just like Olympic lifting. The sport is the training. Baseball, there's so many other qualities. Softball, there's so many other qualities that need to be developed, and they need to taper because there's only so much volume you can put on the body. So yes, we're going to continue to push close to maximums, And an in-season, he should be, a player in professional sports should be training at an intensity anywhere between 80-85% at least once every 7 to 14 days, just so that at the end of the year, they still have enough of their general strength and close enough to absolute strength that they're still powerful at the end. And their off season, you don't start from zero.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so they can just keep the ball rolling when this.
Yeah, so that's the other part that I came to learn, and my traditional schooling and like the CSCS kind of pulled me in a different direction for a short period of time, and I came right back down to the principles. Is the conjugate method, which nonlinear periodization, the idea that all qualities can be trained within a microcycle within 7 days, and that's the type of training platform or framework that I work from, whether we're improving skills, the ability to throw fast, run fast, swing fast, or the abilities to be strong and powerful. They're all mixed together. We're not waiting for, we're not gonna do a general prep phase every off season for 8 weeks just because. You know what I'm saying? That like if you maintained some semblance of strength during the season, yes, we want to stay off of our feet. So we're probably not going to do a lot of running, no plyometrics, so no speed strength from a standpoint of jumping or explosive strength from the standpoint of jumping. But that doesn't mean that we're gonna roll back and I'm gonna treat that player like they've never lifted before. I see a lot of these pro players, all over Instagram, and they're in maintenance mode year round. So like the only reason why they're good is because they're technically good. They're not really pushing their body to another level of performance, and they're sure as heck not being it's not being quantified or tracked, because that would mean I'm actually not getting any better. They would recognize that pretty quickly unless they're dumb. And so that the ability to mix everything together and train it collectively, as opposed to, hey, we need a general prep phase. We're going to spend here and we're going to train at 12 reps, let the body recover. No, there's not enough time. Baseball has a big season and a very small off season. So if you didn't accumulate volume of strength to maintain what you gained in the previous off season, you're not really building. You're always in the same boat.
Yeah.
And then it's tough to really push different qualities. So baseball is a sport that really doesn't get trained properly, in my humble opinion. And again, I don't really work with a lot of big name players. I don't even seek out players. It's really word of mouth. So maybe at some point I'll be able to work with some quote unquote big name players, but I really don't give a crap about their name. I care about helping them getting better, and it's a tough road doing it the right way, So yeah, we do, to answer your question, long-winded, but yeah, maximal strength, absolute strength. So it's a cascading series of exercises. If you really look at how programming should be, the most explosive, the most resource intensive should come in first. So, for example, in this block of programming, we're doing maximal effort jump before we actually do a max effort lift. And that lift is basically, at this point, he's so advanced. It's 12 years of working the system. So he's rotating exercises every week. So the structure stays constant, but he's almost treating it like he's a power lifter in that regard, because he doesn't really need to practice an exercise like, hey, this person needs to get used to a straight bar, this box squat. Like, he's been doing it for 12 years, so he, after one week, he needs a different stimulus of the same movement because if not, his numbers actually go backwards. He doesn't keep getting stronger.
Because he's so well trained.
Because he's
such
advanced.
a long time.
Yeah, he's advanced. You know, so the system, the beautiful thing about that system, and it really is a system, is that regardless of what your age is, you should be applying those principles.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, they call them methods. I call them principles. I mean, the method is my modification on it. You know, so we'll call it the AGON method. But it's really principles. You need to train these strengths. If you don't train maximally, then you're not going to be able to move a minimal weight explosively.
Mm-hmm.
You're just not going to. And young players, you know, I had a conversation today with a parent who came in for an assessment, an evaluation. And, you know, I look at this kid, he's 13 years old. I'm like, God, I wish I was 13 years old and getting this information. Like, they're looking at me and they're really excited and they're super awesome people and they want to get better. And it's like, do you really understand the road it's going to take? Like, people look at an example of Alex and they have no idea.
Oh my God.
The midnight workouts in his grandmother's garage, because they literally invested into a weight room.
Mm-hmm.
And I outfitted it for them. And like, that guy's running sprints in the front of his parking of his house at midnight. And he went to a prestigious school, really hard school. And he's up at freaking 5 a.m. to go to school. And he's working out at midnight. Like, you might not have seen him at a fancy facility, but trust me, what he had in his house was superior to anything else anybody would have.
Yeah, he's a machine. I mean, the way he works out at the gym is there's not a wasted movement. Yeah, it's all very.
There can't be, because he's not that good. Like, he understands. No, seriously. There's 4 levels to in my opinion, there's 4 stages. There's awareness, knowledge, experience, and understanding. I need to be aware of my problem. I need to acquire knowledge to fix the problem. I need experience trying to fix it to figure out how to do it. And then over time, I will gain understanding over what that problem is and how to engineer it and how to solve it, and I'll be a master of it.
Mm-hmm.
So the 4 stages of mastery, he is that because he understands, he's aware that he's not the most explosive. He's not the strongest. He's not the best at any one of the things that requires for him to be an elite level athlete, but he hangs with elite level athletes.
He makes up for it with training.
He's at another level. He's at that level, even though physiologically he's not 6'5". He doesn't run a 6'2", 60. He doesn't throw 105 across the diamond. He's not a freak in anything. And that meticulous way of going to work every day is what sets him apart. I'm just a support mechanism for him. I'm a resource, and he executes the program flawlessly because he understands that if he doesn't do it this way, yeah, we've had some times where in the off season he's like, "Hey man, what do you think about this workout?" And the organization gave it to me, the trainer. I go, "Listen, man, it's a great workout. You want to try it? Go right ahead." So he spent an off season doing that. And this also, he's like, bro, we gotta, let's go back to work. I can't do that no more. And I go, okay, cool. So like, I allow players I want players to understand that this is not me. This is science.
Yeah. It's an amalgamation of science and knowledge that you just were like the conduit.
I'm just a conduit. I'm not anything special other than I read the same books people should be reading. I read them at 14, 15, 16, not 24, 25, 26, or 46. Some people should be reading them now, and they're supposed to be experts. So they have a lot of experience, but don't really have they might have educational knowledge, but they don't actually have knowledge from the best lifters in the world. Like, what did the best lifters in the world do? Go read their logs. Go figure out what they did. And the information's there. It's just the books are very thick, and you got to want to read them to uncover little things. Thankfully, there's resources that have already done it. So just copy it, modify it, but at least understand the principles. So he's just one example. A lot of other players that are now amateur, because the last 3 years, I basically worked with players age 13 to 17. Not a lot of young players and parents really wanted to buy into that. And that's changing, thankfully. But now those guys are in college, they're coming back for break. And, the first thing they say, so am I crazy or what? And they're like, nah, man. I had one pitcher who I asked him, what did you learn when you got to college this year? And obviously COVID kind of messed a lot of things up for them. But he's like, I learned that I was so underprepared in high school, it's a joke. That practice in high school is a joke. That I showed up there and I thought I was at the gym with you. I'm like, oh, good. So they're running a good program. He's like, yeah, the medicine balls, the weighted balls, the bands, the strength training, the power training. We don't run past 40 yards ever. And I'm like, good. So they're applying science. That's fantastic. And what's sad is that here's a kid who's 18, 19 years old, whose testosterone production is starting to taper, because that's what's going to start to happen, right? And his greatest opportunity to be the best he can be, high school years. Thankfully, we were able to work for half of that time. But the fact that he spent so much time on things that were not going to help him at all prior to meeting, that's time he'll never get back. And that hormonally, we can take advantage of this time. And I see that's the problem with amateur sports. A lot of well-meaning, well-intentioned coaches who don't want to learn. I've extended olive branches. I want to help them. I want to share whatever I can. I don't care. I don't care. I'll give it to you, but they either want it so simplified that they don't want to learn a single thing. It's like, just tell me what to do. It doesn't work that way. I tell you what to do, and the second it breaks and you don't know how to solve the problem, or a kid asks you the wrong question, and you're going to look like a fool. So sorry, I can't do that. You have to at least want to learn something, but anyways, I don't even know how we got here, but it's a lot of things that are flawed. A lot of things.
Yeah, you make a good point. When you're in that high school age range, and you like looking back now about high school football, it's like the opportunities you had and like the amount of energy you had. And you said the testosterone production is off the chain. It's like they have like these natural access to free testosterone.
Yes.
No,
they don't even
injections.
No one does anything with it.
Yeah.
No one does anything with it. They just run long distance.
I know.
And now the opposite, that the cortisol levels go up and the testosterone goes down. And that kid's like, I don't understand. I can't lose weight. Coach is making me run for an hour. I can't lose weight. I'm like, yeah, of course you can't lose weight. Your body's going, save me, please. I need cortisol, because if not, I'm going to die. And that's all you're giving. You're giving cortisol and estrogen production spiking, and testosterone is going down.
It's a horrible combination.
You can't understand why you're, exactly. You can't understand why you're not getting stronger when you keep gaining weight. And it's because they're asking you to do the things that your body doesn't want to do. We're not built to be those people. We're not. A general population in general. Yeah, there's some individuals that are programmed to be amazing long distance runners. Amazing. That's fantastic for them. Go look at what they look like. Do you want to look like that and play a sport? No. Okay, then why would you copy what they do?
Yeah,
it doesn't make any sense. You want to look like Usain Bolt. That guy's a monster.
Yeah.
That guy's a monster. Why does he run so fast? It isn't because he runs good. It isn't. It's because he's powerful. He puts 1,000 pounds of force into the ground per stride. 1,000 pounds. You think he can? You think that guy squats 100 pounds? No, he can't squat 100 pounds and absorb 1,000 pounds and run that fast. Impossible. It's not gonna happen.
So have you seen Usain Bolt's strength conditioning regimen at all? Have you ever had a chance to look at that, or you can tell based on his performance?
I've looked at some, and I stumbled across some videos where Louis Simmons at Westside Barbell talks about the trainer for Usain Bolt kind of literally flying to Columbus, Ohio to learn the conjugate system.
That's awesome.
of training. And he doesn't know. He says, I don't really know what he did to become Usain Bolt, but if he applied any of the methods that we talked about, it probably had something to do with it. And again, you have to be genetically predisposed to some capacity, but I've had people that shouldn't belong in my sport, don't belong throwing a baseball. Like, you look at them first day and you're like, bro, this guy can't throw a baseball. And I've had parents that brought me their kid, and I tell them straight up, I said, listen, thank you for coming. Your son's a great kid. I cannot go to sleep at night. I have to tell you, your son is very far away from being a good baseball player at the level he is, and he's super far away from being a college player. So I will take him on under preliminary basis. If he doesn't show the improvement because he's not consistent, I will not work with him.
There's no room for error with those kids, in other words. Yeah.
I can't. Yeah, there's not enough
If he was
time.
a natural beast, amazing, but had horrible mechanics and some issues with learning, you might be able to work with it. But if it's someone that needs
People don't understand that time, man. Time is important. Time is very important.
Well, I think Alex is a great example. If anyone saw the way he trains, it's like that's not like the Instagram, look at me, I'm just amazing at everything. Look at these slow motion videos of me jumping high. Like, this guy is doing all the hard, boring, and tedious work, and he has the freaking tensioner, and he is not this isn't just some side gig.
No.
He's like a serious person about this stuff. Militarily serious when he's working out about it. And I kind of when I talked to him in the gym a couple of times, I almost have to pull him away, and he's sociable and really cool and friendly. But it's when he's lifting, it's a serious thing. And I spotted him the other day, and he was squatting a ton of weight, and it was on bands, and I had to get his chest.
Was it really low? Was it a really low box?
It was a really low box, and I had to really low box, I had to reach all because the box was in the way. I had to spot him from that distance, and I was like, this has been a long time since I've done this. But I felt a sense of pride because I was like, this is how I spot my buddies in high school, squatting at the chest method, and I got him eventually. But I'm not gonna lie, even for me, it was kind of scary because he's squatting so much, and I had to reach over the box.
He was, we talked about special strengths. That's something that I wouldn't normally do. That exercise specifically, it doesn't really have a carryover to the sport. It has a carryover to his problem. So he struggles getting out of the bottom of a lift.
Yeah,
so
me
too. That's a lack of explosive strength or weak hips. So he spends a lot of time doing a lot of special movements. So I threw this in for this block where he has to, and goes against some not principles, but some methods.
It's tearing you apart inside.
Yeah, so basically we put a lot of band tension and very little weight percentage, and forced him to squat to a box that's 5 inches from the ground.
Oh my God! No, this wasn't 5 inches.
Oh, okay, all right. So he was doing traditional box squat. So so he's doing that to force his body to accelerate the bar for a much longer period than he'll ever do in sport. So sport specificity is out the window, but it's just so that he can
perform his other lifts too, right? I mean,
yeah. It's just for him to feel longer leg drive than you normally would ever need in sport. So I throw that in there just in case someone listens and sees a post that he might put out there and sees that exercise and man, that's not going to carry over. Duh, I know that. But for this purpose in time and what he's struggling with, the goal is for him to feel what it needs to be in order to keep driving. So that was just a play that we did. But yeah, it's tough to spot that movement, especially with the big boxes. It's hard. It's really hard.
I was on film too. I was like, I can't mess this up.
Yeah, I think he had 315 on the bar. What you were spotting, he did 315 for 10 reps on his last set, sitting to a box an inch below parallel. And he doesn't tap and go. He sits and drives. It's we're purposely trying to break the kinetic chain of eccentric concentric. Like we're purposely not using momentum at all. And that
because you don't want to use like the elastic principles of the muscles themselves, like the passive stretchy. You want to actually use like the stop and go, like the isometric strength at the bottom and then returning back up, or what's the rationale?
All right. So the reason why, and this is, again, I can't take credit for any of this. It's static overcome by dynamic, and that's why it builds explosive strength while at the same time building whatever other strength you're building. So like, let's say you're doing maximal lift and you're lifting above 90%. If you're doing it to a box that's at about an inch or an inch below parallel or at parallel, and you sit on that box and you stay there, you can stay there, I believe, up to 8 seconds without losing the stretch reflex response. So you'll still be explosive coming out of it at the same speed as if you tapped and go, right? And the reason why that's important is because the stretch reflex really elastic properties really exist in the tendons. So what you're really trying to do is train those tendons to hold that elastic and kinetic energy to be able to respond when you decide. So think of like an offensive lineman who has to hold during a long snap count. Like if he's too explosive there's just gonna be flag on the play all day. For Alex, he has to hold his base, when he's hitting without a lot of movement. So he has to hold tension in his hips for long, and he decides when he releases it. So when you do a tap and go on a squat, you're basically not really releasing or relaxing the muscle tissue enough to be explosive. And just like if you're doing a traditional squat, the muscles are always under tension throughout the entire lift. So when people say, oh, squat is sport specific, I say, tell me one movement in all the sport where your muscle is contracted the entire time. Give me one movement, any movement where all the muscles are contracted at the same time. It doesn't exist. There's always a relaxed muscle and a loaded muscle ready to explode. And that's why box squats, the way that they should be done, not tap and go, sitting back, loading the hamstrings maximally, sitting back into a hammock, which is the cue I use, sit back into a hammock. Okay. That hammock being your glutes and your hamstrings. You're not losing your posture. You're just stretching the hamstrings and glutes maximally and then training it by staying there to hold tension in the hips, even though the quads and the feet are relaxed. And when you're ready, you then drive elastic. You create that contraction in order to start to drive all up again, as opposed to squatting all the way down, if you even can, because most people, the weight gets heavier, the hips get higher, so it's not like you're really squatting all the way down. But you call it a squat. And then having to reverse that muscle action, which is nothing wrong with that, except that doesn't really happen in sport. The muscles aren't in constant tension like that. If you jump for a vertical, when you're at the top of that jump and you're coming down, all those muscles are relaxed. There's no contraction there. So you're actually landing into the ground in a relaxed state and having to quickly create contraction.
Plyometric.
Exactly.
Over an isotonic.
Exactly. So you're thinking the box squat done that way actually trains the stretch reflex like a plyometric to an extent, with maximal weights or minimal weights for speed, depending on what quality you're trying to adapt. But regardless of where you're trying to improve, whether it's explosive strength, which is 30-40%, or speed strength 50-60%, strength speed 60-75%, or maximal strength, absolute strength, it's still loading those muscles and forcing those muscles to hold that elastic property in those tendons for much longer. And then you have to then tell, when do I want to go? So in baseball, you're holding those positions a lot longer than most sports.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Like, especially with the example with the batting stance. But so a couple things now, sure. And then I'm getting really specific here, so this might get boring for regular people.
Yeah, no worries.
Because it involves, I'm thinking of me. This is once again a selfish pursuit. When he holds that squat at the bottom, are you trying to have him hold for more than 8 seconds?
No.
Up to?
No, I mean, it's up. And this is like coming from information. that's straight from powerlifting, straight from the world of powerlifting.
Yeah.
They've been able to hold maximal weights and still come up with them at the same speed, sub-maximal weights and still come up with them at the same speed with advanced lifters. That's another very key important thing, because the more advanced you are, the longer you can hold tension and not lose that tension, because your nervous system has been trained to do it for up to 8 seconds. I believe 8 seconds, maybe 6 seconds, but at least 5 seconds. I might be off on those last 3 seconds. But, I mean, he's not holding it that long. It's just I want him to understand that he wants to sit into – that's why I like the box, like that specific box that's, like, soft, because it also forces the body to sit into it. So even though the box height is exactly at parallel without a load, when he has a maximal load on his back, that box is compressing. Most people are like, oh, it's going to help him come up. No, the opposite. If you stay there long enough, the elastic response of the foam is lost. So I want him to hold that until that kind of dissipates, and then he has to explode from a weak position. So it does us no good to be strong in strong positions. I want to be strong in weak positions, and it does us no good to be strong in the wrong exercises. So I always want that. So we're always working at a deficit almost. So like if we're going to test a regular squat, he'll break records. But it's irrelevant. Like we're not gonna. That's only for personal gain. Like he's past that. You know what I'm saying? If he ever wants to, he can. Hey man, I'm just gonna. He has control over that at will, because he knows the programming as much as I know the programming.
Yeah, his goals aren't just for straight numbers at that point. He's trying to actually develop something from the lifts that will translate to his sport.
Exactly. So we just want to make sure that he doesn't lose that supportive strength level that will help all the other capacities. And that's the problem I see with athletes, especially baseball players. Number one, they never improve it at all because they're never training for that, and everyone that trains them, hides behind, well, it's sport specific. Oh yeah. Well, is strength specific at all? Like, is strength important? Or is it not important because, it's not sport specific?
Yeah, you can always fall back on that excuse.
You can always, exactly. And that's exactly what happens.
And it's totally unquantifiable, like you were saying earlier. So I see what you're saying now.
It's so easy. Yeah. It's so easy. You don't have to measure it. So, like, as long as that guy still can hit the ball and hits it just as far and he feels good, like, oh, my body feels good. Okay. But is it any better? Or is it just as good as it was, like, a year ago? Like, are you getting any better? Because as you age, like people look at LeBron James, right? This is completely a different sport, but LeBron James invests millions of dollars, and it's a good investment. I have a feeling that he's doing some decent stuff in his training because, well, 18, 17 years in the league, doesn't miss many games. He's still performing at 37, 38 years old, and it doesn't look like he's slowing down. At some point at those ages, different qualities take more precedent. You're not going to train that 38-year-old like you're going to train him at 16 years old. Mm-hmm. I get it. Different qualities takes different precedents. However, LeBron James is stronger today in like actual strength, like the same exercise compared to the same exercise today at 38 than he was at 28. I guarantee it.
Crazy.
The muscularity proves it. I mean, go look at his muscularity at 28 years old and look at him now at 38 years old. As you age, you lose muscle mass. So, like the guys that throw the hardest, and this goes back to baseball, guys that throw the hardest for the longest tend to keep getting heavier as they get older so that they can produce more force into the ground. Naturally, their body weight is a force producer. That's what a scale is. So it produces more force into the ground. Therefore, they maintain their velocity. Nolan Ryan, 46 years old, throws 96 miles an hour. Justin Verlander, 38 years old, throws 100 miles an hour. That guy isn't weaker at 38 compared to who he was at 22. He is stronger in everything, and that's why he's able to sustain it. The problem is the baseball player doesn't recognize that reality until it's too late for the most part.
Yeah.
For the most part. Or they just rely on super talent, and literally from one year to the next, that talent goes down the drain because age and hormones hit them hard. And then because they don't have the right training qualities or the right understanding of how to get themselves better or stronger, even when that starts to happen, then what do? They go to illicit drugs because it's an easy route, and those around them don't know how to help his problem, so they're just going to facilitate him because he's the gravy train, whoever that player is.
Yeah.
And then you see, oh, this guy got popped for that. Well, why did he get popped for steroids? Got popped for steroids, whoever it is, because he was getting weaker and he understood it. And he didn't know how to combat it because he had no foundations of strength training. Everything that he had done his entire life up until that point was a freaking fraud, and that's most of them. Thankfully, that's changing, and kudos to all those, whether in Miami or not, that are helping change that in that little demographic. But it's still not enough. So, but that, I mean, I don't even know how we got there either. But I go off on crazy.
I love these because you demonstrate. No, I don't even want to, because you get into good things. I mean, you just basically described the lifespan of athletes and how some might go into something illicit because they weren't actually trained in a way. Like, for example, Alex won't need to do that kind of stuff because he knows the principles of how to stay at the elite level.
And in the end, you know, time is undefeated. It hasn't lost. It'll never lose.
Yeah.
You know, so eventually there's not enough training programs in the world that can overcome that without getting an assistance.
Mm-hmm.
But that'll be beyond the scope of time for that athlete.
Yeah, it could stretch that into 37, 38. That's good. You don't need to.
It's like, that's why, you know, you see.
You have dudes on roids at like 26.
You know, earlier than that, and it's sad because, you know, people don't really know what they're doing to their body hormonally. You know, they're throwing off their own hormone production at that point, and it's all because they didn't get taught properly. They didn't get presented the right information. And the other thing is that the right information and training properly is not a disguise. It's right in your face. It's called hard work. You know, it's hard for him to show up every day at 5 a.m. in spring training before anyone else. Like, he asked me when he first got into pro ball, before he showed up to spring training, and he asked me, like, what should I do? I go, you want to play in the big leagues? It's very simple. You got to show up there day one at 4 a.m. Okay? Got to be there at 4 a.m. so that you can look at your watch and see when does the athletic trainer show up. And whenever that athletic trainer shows up, you got to beat him every day. So you're going to beat him on day one. And then you got to beat him every day for the next 30 days. I guarantee you that by the end of the first week, the owner of the team will know who you are. Because it won't be a one-day thing, it won't be 2 days, it'll be every day. And it'll be every day for the whole spring training. And he did it. And, you know, he went from, here's this guy who got drafted in the 15th round, to, hey, man, this guy's pretty good, to, let's give this guy a chance that maybe he wouldn't have earned any other way. And but he did it. A lot of people know that. There's a lot of. I mean, I'm not unique in that. There's a lot of people have told other players to do the same thing. The question is, do they do it?
Yeah.
And you know, do they spend the time before games to show up early, to get their body right, to get tissue quality, to get stress, whatever it is that they need to get themselves right? Do they have a routine? You know, he showed up at 21 years old with a routine that was all his own, based on, you know, 5 years plus of carving it out for himself. And that to me is a professional. You know, I'll see somebody and how they go about their business, and I will know whether they're an amateur or a professional.
Yeah.
The professional knows exactly what they need to do, when they need to do it, how much they need to do it in order to get their body to do what they know it needs to do to be elite. And the amateur is still dependent on someone telling them what to do. And that's a poor player. That's an underprepared player, no matter how much talent they have. And unfortunately, that's just what happens. A lot of people are poorly prepared because, well, they're not getting taught properly, because teachers, aren't prepared either. So
yeah, it's clear. I can see it.
It's a cycle.
I think anyone in the gym can see it. I was actually talking to someone else at the gym, and I was talking about him, and they were like, "Oh yeah, I can tell that he's doing something like very strategic here because the way he lifts." I'm like, "Yeah, that's definitely like because I knew he wore the outfit and stuff, the gear, the baseball gear, but I was like, no, he's not just like a fan. Like this guy plays. I can tell because everything is by the book, is diligent, and you can tell that he's been trained from a long time, from when he was very young, probably too.
Yeah, and he had a lot of great people around him, along the way. His dad's a doctor, a chiropractic doctor, and so he knows he's educated, and he always put him with people that knew, whether they had the fanfare or not. And so he built a great base, and I know that one of I was looking through the questions you had asked me, to go over, and
we shot from the hip.
It's all right. Yeah. I just wanted to touch upon these because it's very important, and I guess I'm doing your job now, but so
I like it.
The importance of playing a range of sports as a kid, and I wanted to touch upon that because it's so important. And our mutual connection is Alex, so he played every sport growing up. So the way I explain it to players, to parents, to anybody who will listen, is that a pyramid is only as tall as its base is wide, and you or the athlete needs to decide, how big of a pyramid do I want to build? And once you know how big the pyramid needs to be, then you got to decide to gather a lot of sand. It takes a lot of sand to build a lot of bricks, to put a lot of bricks together to build a pyramid. So that sand is the accumulation of time, the accumulation of work. And the more sand you have, the more bricks you can build. The more bricks you can build, the taller the pyramid. So unfortunately, and that's why I'm very passionate about education and getting players to learn to become their best coach, even if the coach in the end doesn't like it too much, like their skill coach. I try to guide them to not be, condescending and, know it all, because been there, done that, and it doesn't end up helping you. So learn from me, but that doesn't mean you can't acquire a lot of knowledge. So a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of knowledge, and then you got to build a bunch of bricks, and then you got to put them in the right order. But your job as an athlete is to build the pyramid. Your job is not to decide where to build it. So the coach decides when you're going to play, where you're going to play. Your parent decides what school you're going to go to, what team you're going to play in youth sports. A big league scout is going to be the one that's going to decide whether you can play in the big leagues or not, or play, beyond college. You decide to build a pyramid. You decide to invest the time to carve out sand from the earth and start putting it into bricks and putting those bricks together to form a pyramid. It does you no good to just accumulate a lot of sand and not start building bricks. It does you no good to build a scrapyard full of bricks, but none of them are in the right order, and a pyramid isn't being built. Does nobody any good to do any of those things in isolation. They all must be done together, and that's where a plan comes in. And that's where having people with the right resources, or they themselves are the resource, to guide the direction and the construction of that pyramid. But it's the player's job to do those things necessary to build the pyramid itself. And unfortunately, we got a lot of people just acquiring a lot of sand. They haven't built a single brick, or they're building a lot of bricks and basically getting strong at the wrong things. So a lot of bricks, but none of those bricks are going to the pyramid that they want to build.
Yeah.
Or worried about where they're going to play, where is the pyramid going to show up, as opposed to be the best you possibly can be. Like, really be the best. Don't talk about being the best. Like, I don't talk about how good I am or I'm not. I personally think I am a nobody working with a bunch of nobodies, all trying to be somebody. That's how I view it. That's how I always view it. No matter what people think of me when I express that. Like, yeah, that guy's full of shit. No, I'm honestly, genuinely mean that. If that player isn't going about their business that way, that person's not, in my mind, they're not a professional. They're not really trying to be the best. Like, you look at Mike Trout, to use an example, Major League Baseball. Why is he the face of baseball? He carries himself a certain way. It's not just because he's so talented. There's a lot of talented people who are not the face of baseball because they're not a reflection of what a professional is. They're just professional talent, but they're not a professional in their field and how they go about being the best. Be the best. Too many parents worried about where they're going to play. Too many players worried about where they're going to play. They're not focusing on building a pyramid. They're just got a bunch of sand and blocks, maybe, if they're lucky.
Yeah, so parents who want their kids to be taking part in these like major league style training regimens at a young age would be wanting a lot of bricks, but they just need the basis. They need to start.
Yeah, they got to acquire a lot of sand. They got to have coordination. They have to coordination. So like, speed is coordinated strength. Guys and girls show faster movements because they just coordinate whatever strength they do have in the specific movement pattern they were exposed to. That's it. But once you know a movement, like I used the agility ladder earlier, once you know how to do that movement, Louis would say, once you know how to write your name, you only know how to write it wrong. Like, you can only write it wrong because I already know how to do it. So once I know how to do something, that's it. I know how to do it. So the question is, can I do it faster? Can I do it more powerfully? Can I do it more explosively? How much better can I do it? Not can I do it. I already know how to do it. Like, once I know how to squat, okay, great. I know what a squat is. I know how to execute it. How do I do it faster? How do I do it with more weight? How do I get better at it? Same thing with the movement in sport. Once I know how to throw a baseball properly, which is another caveat altogether because 99% of people have no idea how to do it properly. Once I know how to do it, then what are the qualities holding me back from doing it better? And do they matter right now? Or I'm 8 years old, I should be playing multitude of sports to create this basket of abilities, even if in the end I'm not going to use all of them to the same capacity, but I have been exposed to a lot of different qualities of coordination and movements that at some point in my development are going to help me do something on the field or on the court, whatever sport I do decide to specialize in, and I'm going to be able to do it at an elite level. The Russians called it the rule of 3. Every 3 years, their programming cycle changed, from 7 to 9, 10 to 12, 13 to 15, 16 to 18, 19 to 21, et cetera, all the way down the road. So what did they do early in their development? They put them in, everyone was trained like a gymnast because what are you learning? You're learning spatial awareness. You're learning proprioception. You're learning how to show explosiveness in a very safe environment. A lot of padded boxes. You're learning to eliminate fear. You're tumbling. You're jumping. You're swinging. There's none of these movements are going to be fearful. So when you decide to be a hurdler, you're not going to run into that first hurdle and go, oh, my God, I'm going to eat it. No, you're going to go, okay, that's what I got to do. Okay, boom, I got to do it. It's ingrained. Like, there's no fear to do it. Just do it. So what ends up happening, we have specialization in this country, and that's why we're so terrible at it. We can only find outliers. We can't build them. We just pluck them. And it's because we don't have a really big basket of general preparation. We have a lot of special preparation at too early of an age, and I see it. I have kids that come to me, they're 15 years old, who only played one position, first base. And the parent brings him and says, oh, he's got to get his arm stronger. Okay, why does he get his arm stronger? He plays first base. Well, they got like too many first basemen, and, we want to see if we can get his arm stronger so he can pitch. Okay, so how he doesn't hit? That's code for I'm not good enough to hit. So I got to find something because I finally figured out that my son or myself are not good enough to keep playing at this level. So they're reaching.
Yeah.
So that person shows up and they throw 50 miles an hour, 60 miles an hour. Like, that's it. They can't throw any harder than that. And they're going, is that radar gun real? I go, yeah, this is the gold standard. That's why it's thousands of dollars. This isn't a $200 little pocket radar. This is the gold standard. So what this says is what it is, bro. You throw 65 miles an hour. The question is, what are you going to do about it? So a lot of people see that, they get distraught, and they quit. And they say, that's it, their career is over. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Go do something else with your life. But you're going to stumble across the same exact problem. At some point, you have to show up and get better. At some point, you have to compete against that. So the rule of three, or the right programming, doesn't exist in this country, because the way that things are built for amateur sports, people, specifically parents, are sold a bag of goods, intentionally or unintentionally, by people that either know and don't care, or don't know, which is just as bad.
Mm-hmm.
And all that's happening is leading a massive populations to being underprepared to move. And then we're talking about physical education courses being stripped out of the education system and underfunded. So at the end of the day, of course the kids wants to play esports. It's easy. I'm not saying the game is not hard. It's very hard, but it's easy on the system. The system isn't being asked to do a lot of physical work, so it's terrible, this hyper specialization. Parents should be asking their players and their kids to play as many different sports as possible for as young of a time as possible. One of my players, who I actually had a conversation with earlier today, he throws, I think the hardest he's thrown is 97 miles an hour. This guy is a strong dude. He's actually rehabbing from an injury. So, anybody that wants to blame me for the injury, I'll take the blame. You can't win the race attempting not to crash. Just remember that. There's a lot of
you own everything. Everything you're like
suck, we
ultimate
suck, it's
ownership.
my fault. If we win and we're good, it's because the players are good. And if the guys get hurt, it's all my fault.
It's a good attitude to have.
Okay with it. I really don't care. I don't care because I don't care. When
you're doing everything the best you can, and you're literally.
That's it. So he's talking to me, and he tells me the kid didn't even play organized baseball till he was like 11, 12 years old. And at 17 was throwing, 94 miles an hour, and now at 18, 19 he's throwing 97, and he's going to be a top 10, 5 first round. I don't know, whatever he performs on the field, but physical ability, he could be at the highest level. Whether he produces statistics that allow people to say, yeah, this guy's a first rounder or a 10th rounder, that's on him. But physically capacity, this guy has as much talent as anybody. The guy didn't play organized baseball till he was 12, 11, 10, I don't know. He didn't play at 4. He didn't play no T-ball, I'll tell you that. And then you have another kid who's playing Division I baseball, who played basketball at 15 years old, never played baseball, and just decided, I'm going to play baseball because my friends on the baseball team were throwing a football with me, and they said, hey, you got a good arm. Then they bring him to me because they're all training with me, and I'm like, yeah, so what's your deal? He's like, I never played baseball. I'm a basketball player. What do you mean you're a basketball player? Yeah, I run, some track, and I play some baseball. I go, okay, cool. Sure, come in for an eval. I'll take a look at you. The guy throws, and I'm like, bro, for guys that never play baseball, it's pretty good. You have a relatively good throwing pattern. You want to work? Let's go. That kid ended up within a year and a half getting a Division I baseball scholarship as a pitcher.
That's crazy. What?
And
I didn't even play baseball. I always kind of wanted to play baseball, but man. I remember in middle school, I was like, I haven't played yet. I'm probably going to be bad.
It's a hard sport.
A lot of skill involved. Specific skills.
It's specific skills, So the idea, you throw like a girl, which that's a knock on girls, but that's really an immature throwing pattern. We're all born to throw. The idea that throwing is unnatural is laughable. We're all born to throw. We've thrown toys when we were toddlers. We've thrown boogers across the room. We've thrown paper in basketball. It doesn't matter. We've thrown shit all over the place.
Yeah.
So throwing is not the problem. It's throwing with precision that is the difficulty. Not just with accuracy, not just with control, with precision. And that's that's the most finely tuned skill in sports, and it takes years, a decade even, to get to that point. And it's focused, repeated efforts over long periods of time that are boring. They are boring. It takes a certain mindset.
Yeah.
If you don't have it, you're not going to get it. Not because you're not physically talented, because you're not willing to sit there and do the same repetitive task and deal with the boredom. And that's what makes that sport and that position so difficult. So here's a kid who didn't play the sport. His dad takes him to a recruiting showcase, basically, where they put these kids in a bus and they take them up the East Coast to different schools. The dad's like, hey, what do you think about taking him to that? I go, I think it'll be fantastic. You think he's ready? Sure, why not? Now, at that time, he was throwing like low to mid 80s, low 80s.
This is a basketball kid?
This is a basketball kid,
okay.
Yeah. So what's funny about the story is that all of these parents mostly are Hispanic, Latino parents of kids in Miami who've been born and raised here. And then, baseball is everything. And here's this kid. Parents came from Cuba, but he's born here, and I don't know that background. But anyways, never played baseball. And all of a sudden he shows up. So imagine everyone's trying to find out who the heck is this kid? Where did he play growing up? Because I don't know him. And they're all trying to find, the dirt. And the kid goes out there and he secures a scholarship to a Division I university. And he took a spot from other kids who have been playing their entire life in baseball as the world, and their parents are going, this guy's going to be a first-round pick, yada, yada, because they're all crazy. And here comes this kid who played multiple sports growing up, never played the actual sport, and within a year and a half was acquired just enough skill to get a college coach to say, you're going to come to play baseball for me.
What year was this?
This was, he's a freshman in college this year.
Okay, so it's like 2019.
Yeah. So
how's he doing this year? Did he do well?
Well, the season hasn't started, but he had a limited fall. But he broke an all-time record for velocity. He was up to 88, 89 miles an hour, and he's going to be one of the starters as a freshman. He's projected to be the number 3 starter on his team in a Division I school. So like the idea. Now, obviously, those are outlier stories, so people are like, oh, yeah, well, that's one guy. No, you're not understanding. You must build this massive base. Like, I look back at my own development. Like, I did judo for 10 years. That's a lot of tumbling, a lot of rolling, a lot of flipping, a lot of body awareness. Played every single sport with the exception of soccer because I don't really necessarily like soccer. Nothing against soccer people, but... Well,
grappling sports are great for that kind of stuff. It mimics sports, a lot of, like...
yes.
Milestones for kids, like as babies.
Yes.
Like every few months there's a different milestone you got to hit. And with these when we were learning it in PT school, I was like, geez, this is just like the jiu-jitsu class I'm taking.
That's right. So like grappling, the ability to strain, like you're straining against somebody. The best multiple sport athletes that end up being really good at like a sport like baseball, my opinion, especially the guys that don't come from like good weather sport, like climates, and end up being really good. They were wrestlers. They wrestled, and they
transfer as well. Yeah.
Or you're anti-rotation, rotation. You're throwing somebody over, or you're resisting somebody.
Yeah.
And you're working that plane of movement, and
multiple planes of movement. That you're not expecting. It's not like a sport where it's like, okay, set up, like move your arm this way and throw it.
Exactly.
You're constantly being there's a perturbation from another human.
Exactly. And those qualities, they're so important, but it's afraid the kid's going to get hurt, he's going to do this, he's going to do that. Like I had a parent saying, but I'm afraid his arm's going to get hurt. And I asked, it was a lady, I said, listen, thank you so much for bringing him. I just want to ask a question. How much is someone paying your son to play baseball today? So what is his arm worth?
Mm-hmm.
I am not going to tell you that your son is never going to get hurt. That is not what I am here to do. I am here to tell you that if he does get hurt, he's going to be very prepared to come back from the injury. But we're not attempting to win the race while also attempting not to crash. I'm not looking to have a clean car at the end of the race, but I am looking to be first. And if that's not something that fits in your mind, then what I'm telling you, no one's going to actually get him to that level without risk. Everything is a risk. My job is to help manage the risk. Your job is to help manage the risk in other ways. His job is to learn what risk is and learn how to manage it for himself. We all have hands in that. But I'm not here to eliminate all risks because it's impossible.
Yeah.
If you can't accept the fact that your son throws 80 miles an hour and no one's going to give him $1 to play college baseball, then accept the fact that this is where your career ends. And that's okay. Go do something else with your life, but don't cry about it. Don't tell me, oh, I coulda, woulda, shoulda. No, you didn't. You didn't, because I threw 75 and then I ended up throwing 95. I know what it takes to get from there to there. And you're not going to tell me what it takes, because it doesn't take different for you than to me, because we're the same physiological system. We're the same. Yeah. All human beings, we're physiologically the same with certain limitations, restrictions. My limitation is I'm 5'9.5". So when people say, oh, you can't throw fast unless you're tall, then what's my excuse? But I couldn't throw fast when I weighed 155 pounds and I squatted 135. But at 195 pounds, I squatted 485 for 5 and deadlifted 505 for 5. So when I could do that, I threw 90 miles an hour plus.
Because you transferred that isotonic strength down the chain to the power, and then you converted that towards the training, and then that all carried over. Instead of just winging it. Exactly. So this is why.
All over time. People think it's just technique. But once I know how to do something, I'm not going to get any better doing it repeatedly. Unless it's a sport like baseball where we're looking for not just control, precision. So when precision is necessary, yes, you need to repeat it. You can't stop repeating it. So then that's the juxtaposition, the double-edged sword. Well, if I keep throwing, I'm going to get hurt because I'm going to overthrow. Okay. Well, the guy that threw the most pitches in the history of a baseball game, his name is Nolan Ryan. He threw 244 pitches. Vida Blue threw 216 in the same game. They both threw over 200 pitches in the same game. I believe Nolan Ryan retired 17 years later, and Vida Blue might have retired like 8 or 10 years after. Neither of them got hurt because of that day. What they had, they're not superhuman. We're better prepared physically today than they were in the 70s, right?
Yeah.
We think that, but we're not. We are more controlled and restricted. So those guys threw every 4 days in a game. Now we throw every 5 to 7 games, every 5 to 7 days. We have more rest, but they had more work. So which one do you want? Do you want more work and less rest, or do you want more rest and less work?
Their body's adapted.
Bingo. Specific adaptations to impose demands. They weren't concerned with the total number of pitches. Now, they weren't stupid either. People say, oh, well, then you're advocating guys just blow their arms out.
Gunslinging, 3 days a week.
No, I mean, my grandfather is the best coach I ever had. We just had 5-6 buckets of baseballs in the backyard. I hand-built my mound because I wanted a mound in the backyard, and he put a tire swing set. And I had a chalkboard, and every day I would show up and I would just throw balls through the tire, and every single day. It didn't matter what I was doing, playing a game, practice, it didn't matter. I showed up home, and unless I had a game at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I was in the backyard first throwing through the tire. So some days I threw 10 balls, some days I threw 50 balls, some days I felt really good, I threw 200, 300 balls. You know, what ended up happening, I built specific work capacity. I can handle a tremendous amount of work throwing. I don't have a scar on my elbow. I don't have a scar on my shoulder. Did I hurt my arm? Yeah. Small injury that actually helped me understand physical therapy, recovery, prehab, all those. It was the greatest thing in the world. If I wouldn't have had that, I wouldn't have learned anything I've learned. But the foundation was my grandfather saying something so simple. Throw until you're tired. Just before you're tired. Don't wait until you're exhausted. Just until you're a little fatigued. Count how many throws that is. Tomorrow, see if you can do more. You probably are going to do less. It's okay. Just don't throw to the point where you're fatigued and exhausted, because that's where you're going to get hurt. And if you get hurt and you blow your arm out, you can't get a new arm at Publix. That's all he would tell me. You can't buy a new arm at Publix. So just stop a little bit shy of that, and we'll do it tomorrow. So there'll be days where I threw 10 balls, and I said, no, I'm done. I don't want to throw no more. I'm going to go play basketball. I'm going to go rollerblade around the block. I'm going to pretend I'm, a speed skater. So what speed skating? I build a lot of hip strength.
Yeah.
Where's my flexibility? Oh, my butt cheeks would be on fire. My quads would be on fire. I'm like, man, And I didn't process any of that. No one in my family has big legs. None. There's not a one human being.
Chicken legs.
But I have really strong legs, big calves, big butt cheeks. Like,
those epigenetics, they play a big role. Like we were talking about earlier with high school and stuff. Like, I bench pressed and squatted all through high school because of football.
Crazy.
I used to bench every day. It was, I got a couple of shoulder injuries from that, but I was a freak. But now it's like I permanently have like this chest muscle that
100%
won't go away.
You conditioned your body at a moment in time where it altered the way that your body was going to be structured. And same thing for me in throwing. Like, you're building volume. You're building volume. You know, the bodybuilder builds a bigger muscle tissue, bigger propensity for strength by doing a lot of volume. They don't do a lot of intensity. Sure, they're strong, but they're not as strong as powerlifters. They're not training the nervous system to be strong. They're training their body to handle a lot of volume. So when you throw at low intensities, medium intensities, you're building a lot of volume. You're building a lot of capacity to handle work. By putting a predisposed limit on how much throwing you can do, you'd never allow the body to push beyond those limits. It's like putting a shark in a fish tank. It's never going to grow beyond the fish tank. You know, it's just that mentality. You know, to say that Nolan Ryan and Vida Blue were better trained 50 years ago, 40 years ago than players are now, it's sad to say that. But in some regards, they are. In some regards, there are, because they are allowed to push the levels of their own development.
Yeah.
The problem is those people came about in a world that isn't the world that exists now. Everyone's afraid of getting hurt or hurting someone, and I understand those sentiments. But at the same time, I also understand that you're not going to be able to push the body's limits unless you push these intensities. If you don't train above 90%, you're not training maximally. You're not training maximally. You're not recruiting maximal neurological. You're not recruiting the nervous system and the muscle fibers. The recruitment is wrong. You're not, people say, oh, you got to train fast to be fast. No, that's part of the conclusion, part of the equation. But if you don't first tell those fibers to move, like, you don't wake them up. And you're not going to wake them up by moving fast. You're going to wake them up by lifting really heavy weights, because fast twitch fibers do not turn on unless the all or nothing principle is engaged. And the all or nothing principle must be used in order to engage them. And that means you got to train at intensities high enough to turn them on. If not, the threshold won't hit and they won't work. So you'll just be using a lot of slow twitch fibers, even though you think you're training explosively. You're not gonna. So you build a lot of work capacity with lower intensity and medium intensity work at high volumes, and you track it. And that's what I did unknowingly. Like, now I understand, like, why I could throw so many baseballs without really getting tired. That doesn't mean I didn't suck. I was awful. I had some years where I was the worst player ever. In college, for 3 years I was the worst pitcher in college baseball. And then my fourth year I became one of the best pitchers in college baseball. So I understand what it's to be the worst, and then to have to figure it out to try to be the best, even though you're still the worst.
Yeah.
So, like, my grandfather was a genius, and I asked him now, like, do you know what you're doing? He's like, no, it just makes common sense. So Vida Blue and Nolan Ryan, those guys, they just use common sense. If I can handle more work, then I'm better. That I have, and to an extent, that's the process of playing multiple sports. I gotta handle a lot of work in as many different ways that my body can be stimulated. Basketball is going to be a different animal. It's like I can train a baseball player to run sprints, right? But then I'd say, okay, we're going to play ultimate frisbee, and he's exhausted. But what? Because that demanded a different animal. So okay, we're gonna go play basketball. That guy's exhausted. We're going to go play soccer. Guy's exhausted. Why? Because it's outside of your scope. But all of those things should be part of your world growing up, so that when you do narrow your focus and you focus on whatever it is you want to do, you have those experiences. They're in your physiological makeup. And mentally, you've had to push through certain things that you're not going to see in sport. And I just think, if you look at history, if you look at the best players, they all played other sports, whether they played it formally or recreationally or like just in, their backyard. I played basketball every single day. Every day I played basketball. I rollerbladed. Once I got rollerblades at 9 years old, I rollerbladed almost every day around my block. Like, I didn't go to a pitching coach until I was 15 years old. Those are all things. Now you got parents calling me, like the kid's like 7 years old. Hey, can you work with my son? I go, no. What do you mean? What am I going to give him? What am I going to give him? Your son's going to be the best 12-year-old in America and the shittiest 17-year-old. Because he's going to be so skilled at 12, everyone's going to think he's a superstar and he's going to be the next coming of the greatest. And those guys sit on their butt and do nothing. And by 15, someone like me leapfrogs them.
Yeah. That happened with kids in my football in high school, like the ones that matured the earliest and were just kind of like big dogs. And then all of a sudden, like, everyone's flying through them. Yeah, right?
Yeah. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in upstate New York, though.
Uh-huh. So that's why I make the statement, we make the best 12-year-olds and the worst 17-year-olds, because at 12 years old, if you look at amateur sports in baseball, softball, more in baseball, the teams that are in South Florida are top 10 in the country, and Southern California, some Texas. They're all there. But then you look at, Alex was the one that told me the other day, he goes, hey, God, if everybody's so good and everyone's the best performance trainer and all these guys in Miami, they're superstars, and how come the last guy that got drafted in the first round from Miami was like 8 years ago?
Really?
If every hitter and if every guy that's a superstar, everyone's coming up, they're all animals. According to Instagram and their coaches, they're all the best.
This Miami flexes the hardest about everything, right?
They're the best. But where's Mike Trout from? New Jersey.
Yeah, right.
He's from Miami. He's from New Jersey. What'd that guy do? You think he only played baseball? No, he didn't. He played every sport growing up. You think the first time he saw a weight room and actually lifted weights, because, I mean, a lot of guys in Miami see weight rooms, but they don't actually really lift weights. You think that guy was when he was 21 years old or 18 years old when he showed up to college? Like one of my players, like, yeah, man, a lot of kids, especially all the kids that came with me from Miami, it's the first time they ever lifted weights, and I'm like, oh, this is fun. And
did make you way stronger very quick, yeah.
Yeah, did that change your life? You go, oh yeah, the coaches loved me because they knew I can do this. Oh, so you were prepared, so you just jumped over everybody.
Yeah.
What do those guys have in common? They all played multiple sports, specifically football, wrestling, basketball, and baseball. It was the end skill, but
some of these cultures like that develop in these big sports areas aren't the best, is what you're saying. Like, they make people into this like hyper specialization, the focus on
it's sad
game performance and all that too. So I can see that.
It's all games,
Gamers. I'm a gamer, coach. I'm a gamer.
Yeah, I'm a gamer. And in the end, they're just. It's not an attack on that. Like, I'm not saying that that's not important. It's just not the most important at that moment. Like, obviously kids want to have fun and the other part, and I had a conversation with a parent, and he looked at me, I was like, listen, man, it's not your fault, dude. I'm not trying to be an asshole, and tell you ruined your kid. It's not the case. Okay. It's just, how many times do you have to see Mickey Mouse? You know what I'm saying? How many times do you have to drive from Miami to Orlando to play in another tournament and see Mickey Mouse? All to find the same teams all over again. You guys are just playing. You might as well just call each other in Miami and say, hey, you want to meet up at the park and play against each other?
Yeah.
Number one, you guys are spending a fortune to then come and cry to people like myself about how, man, can you help me out? Can't this really? You just went to Mickey Mouse freaking 4 weekends in a row. So what's important to you? So now you have a kid who's 15, 16 years old, bad body, not a kid that you can push, wants to just play baseball, but guess what? That's not going to make you a better baseball player anymore. You know how to write your name. You better figure out how to do it faster and cursive and, different ways. And playing more baseball isn't going to help you. And now you come and meet me, and you might think for a moment I'm an asshole because I'm telling you this. I'm just telling you the truth. And most people aren't willing to tell you the truth, you know, because they're always the bad guy. Everyone wants the truth as long as it's not about them.
Yeah.
You know, everyone. And that's everyone. That's human nature. Yeah. I program myself to say, yeah, please tell me the truth about me. Because if that's the way you see it, all right, maybe there's value there.
That's how you grow. You know? Humbles you too.
Maybe there's value there. You know,
Alex can take
whatever.
Or yeah, you could say, dude, you suck. That sucked. It was terrible. Yeah, and he's just like, okay, how can we get better?
All right. Oh yeah, 100%.
There's no ego.
And that's no. There can't be. There can't be, because it's the enemy of everything. And we all have it. We all have it. Every single person that's saying, "Oh, you got check your ego at the door." We all have it. The question is, are we going to be aware of it? Are we going to be aware of its negative, of what it's going to do and hold you back from accomplishing, or are you just going to ignore it and think it's not there? You know, that holds everybody back. So this parent, you know, said, "Listen, man, I'm gonna work with the kid. I love to help him, man. You guys are good people. You hurt me, not you specifically, your story every time I hear it, because it could be so easily prevented if the right process was in place. One day I'll implement it when I have the right people around me, because I cannot do it by myself. I'm the conduit. I cannot do it. You know, and not say it'll be perfect, but it sure as heck be better than what we have right now. You know, and the kids deserve better. It's the other part. It deserve better. You know, if we know more, then how come things aren't better?
Yeah.
Then we have to question: do we really know more? Do we really know, or do we think we know?
Mm-hmm.
You know, do we think that we're smarter just because we have fancier places? That the best athletes don't come from the nicest facilities. You know, they don't. The Bulgarians, they produced world record holders in shoe boxes with a barbell and a platform, and that's it. And they destroyed us in the Olympics. You know, it's just
the principles that succeed in the end.
Yeah.
It's not really all the flashy stuff is nice. The nice new barbell.
It's exactly. It's like bands and chains like that. You looked at it and say, oh man, he's doing something. Yeah, but Alex spent freaking 8 years without seeing a band or a chain.
Yeah.
You know, and that doesn't mean I will approach it that way. At the time, I thought those are really advanced tools, and they are, and they aren't. Now I look at it as what adaptation am I specifically attempting to accomplish with these tools? You know, I'll program a kid that just showed up to train. You know, if I had access to a facility or like everything done, you know, with everything I needed, that first thing I would do is I would load the barbell. Once that person could goblet squat, you know, 60, 70 pounds with good squatting technique, understands what he's doing, I'd load a barbell, and I wouldn't put any straight weight on it. I would only put chains, and I would overload him on chains. So at the bottom, it doesn't weigh anything, and at the top, he has to strain and accelerate.
Mm-hmm.
Kids that are young need to learn how to strain. That's why the wrestlers became better players faster, because they understood that straining was part of the mechanism, because it was part of their world.
Mm-hmm.
And most kids, when you give them straight weight at the beginning, they're going to start to strain and they're going to give up because they don't want to push through.
They can't push that pain tolerance level.
They don't want to push through.
Yeah.
So that's a use where now I approach it different. I don't look at bands or chains as advanced tools. I just look at them as tools. I don't put them in that box, in that category. You know, I don't want to limit the 10 to 12-year-old. I don't believe the 10 and 12-year-old needs to train any different than an 18 to 20-year-old now. I used to. You know, I think that once someone accumulates enough sand and can start building some blocks, they should start building blocks.
Mm-hmm.
They shouldn't just focus all their effort on sand.
Yeah.
They should split their time.
It is a careful balance.
Sand.
Yeah.
Yeah, as opposed to, hey, this is a tool we shouldn't be using right now, yada, yada, yada. I don't see it anymore that way. I guess that's like the nonlinear periodization, the conjugate periodization, like eating at my brain. and applying it more and more. But I mean, sometimes I say, man, can I do it different? And I try and I figure out, man, trying it different just verifies
Yeah.
that the original way is better.
But that
Not
took a
because
while
I
to get
invented
to.
it. Well,
Yeah.
yeah. So I come circling back around. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
well, back here
It's a
again,
scientific method with your.
back here again, and that's why now I don't even question. I still question it because it's the scientist in me, I guess. But um, it's there. I don't see that there's a better way to train someone than to properly organize different qualities and put them in the right order and to train them concurrently, as opposed to waiting for one of them to get there to then stack the next one. Um, I'll just use standards. Like, for example, someone can hit a 80-pound goblet squat. So if you can hold a goblet squat with 60, 80 pounds, I don't give a crap if you're 12 years old or 70 years old. You can now put a bar on your back. You can now start to load yourself with a trap bar or with a deadlift. Like, you can start pushing beyond that weight.
Yeah.
Um, that's the other thing. Fear of lifting, man. These parents are, oh, is he gonna stop growing? And I'm like,
Oh, yeah, that's the big
no.
fear.
Did he stop growing at 1 year old when he pulled himself up from the chair and stood up against gravity? Because that's a maximal
Yeah, think
force
about
when you
that
weigh.
load, right? You're like 12 pounds.
You're 12 pounds and you're pushing against 9.8 meters per second squared. That
Jeez. We
that
gotta
that's a
take it easy.
maximal force.
They need
And the
like a
only
load
way we could
management day in that
think about it.
once a
The only
week.
way we
Set it
the
out.
only way we stood, the only way we all stood is if we overcame the force of gravity. At
Hmm.
one point in time, the force of gravity was 100% of our maximum, and therefore we had to stop. We lifted ourselves up and we
Oh
fell,
my God,
and we
imagine the force of gravity being your weight now. I feel sorry for everyone lighter than me.
yeah. So think about that. Like
Yeah.
it's it,
210
yeah.
meters per second.
It's crazy. It's crazy. But that's that's how I look at it. And when they ask that question, I'm like, yeah, I understand your situation, but or your perspective, but it doesn't hold any water. It's just not the way it is.
Yeah,
You know?
managing those expectations from the parents too. Listen, this was a
Yeah, it's
great. We're
terrible.
going on
It's
two
crazy.
hours. This is a great episode. I would love
I
to
could
talk to
go
you
crazy.
again.
No, you can say whatever you want.
I might make this into two episodes. I'm looking at
That's
this
fine.
is 2 hours, so that'd be good. Part one and part two. But just to wrap things up, I still have to eat dinner.
Oh
Um,
man,
I
it's
know,
terrible.
right? Yeah, you see, you planned your day out better. I try to squeeze in a boxing class, and now I'm just
Oh.
like. But no, this was amazing. This is a lot of great
Sure.
nuggets in here. I'd love to talk again very soon. I was one before we go, we
Sure.
need to get to the nuts and bolts here. How can people who are interested in utilizing your services, especially parents or kids or high schoolers, middle schoolers, people who want to
Yeah.
learn about you and work with you potentially? Well, what's the first step they can take? Because I know about your Instagram. I know about some of the
Sure.
stuff.
So on my Instagram, oh, my puppy coming in. On my Instagram, Coach Agon, Coach.Agon. So Instagram.com/Coach.Agon. There's a link in my bio. Anyone can sign up for a free throwing mechanics and arm health
I saw
evaluation.
that. Yeah.
So they'll be able to sign themselves up. They'll be in person if they wanted to. If they're not in the area and want to still have a conversation about how I can help them, they can sign up for a Zoom call. So they can just direct message me on Instagram. Both my websites are currently down. I'm only using some back pages for some forms that we use. But other than that, I don't have my website up right now. So it's getting some revampage. So everything's going through my Instagram. And yeah, it's a free eval. I'm not. It's an opportunity to build some connection with parents and players and be a resource. They'll be able to come in, get screened for elbow and shoulder issues that could be plaguing them, and then they're able to take part in a throwing session with the players that we're working with and get a feel of how things work. And if they think that this is something that they're going to be willing to commit to and work day to day, and I think that they're going to come in with the right mindset, at least preliminary mindset, we'll take a shot at it, you know, and then we'll walk down the path to being a member. And so yeah, it's a pretty simple, straightforward process. And I work with players mainly ages 10 and up. I do have some exceptions to the rule if the parent is of like mind, you know, and it's really really good in their perspective. I may make exceptions to the rule, but mainly 10 and over. And again, it's more about the mindset of the player and the parent, specifically at those ages, to understand, hey, this is not a quick fix. This is a long-term process if you really want to get to those levels that you're truly seeking. So, but yeah, Instagram.com/coach.agon, DM me or follow that link if you're in-house in Miami, and you know, we'll take it from there.
Yeah, Coach, thank you very much for coming on. I'm going to make a bunch of clips from this episode because we have a lot of content to review. Next time I have you on, which I'm down to have sooner rather than later, we could delve even deeper into some of these specifics because you went deep even without me even asking for it. And I was like, wow, this brought up a lot of questions I could ask. But in that case, we'd be going all night because you are a wealth of knowledge. And I've talked to other strength coaches, and you're definitely extremely knowledgeable. So this is great. And the rationale you go through in your head is what sets you apart. And just like I said earlier, like I'm a CSCS too, but like that doesn't mean anything. And I think you said you let yours lapse, which is like a perfect example of how the letters don't mean anything. Like I'm a CSCS, which means, okay, I read the book, I passed the test, and I'm a PT. But in terms of sports specific training, I wouldn't recommend myself for like a baseball player's sports specific from start to finish. Like this is where the difference is made. People who are intrinsically researching and reading and have this knowledge and use the scientific method, and they also question the Socratic method, all the methods to develop all the methods to like to develop and work with this programming. And once again, I don't use any band tensioner measures, so just that alone, I was like, okay, Alex, both Alexes, you guys got me. I'm done. Like this, I was like, I gotta know who your coach, who's this guy in the FaceTime, because I gotta talk to him. He knows what he's doing. But thanks for coming on so much.
Thank you for having me, and appreciate it. And whenever you want.
Thank you very much. Yeah, you're a great sport.
Times you want to do.
Oh, I love it. Okay, for sure. Thank you very much. And once again, this is HealthCast 305. Dr. Rob signing off. Here once again today with Coach AGON, Alex Gonzalez. Excellent baseball, sport-specific coach here. Please look into him, guys. I'll include all the stuff in the show notes too, okay?
Cool.
All right. Bye-bye. Thank you very much.